Congratulations on your achievement. This is for you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, we did it! That was amazing! We nailed the debate!
You guys ready for the debate finals? Totally. I've been practicing all week.
Me too. Science fair is tomorrow.
Hey, is it time for class?
Almost. Walk with us.
Yeah, let's go.
We are called to action, not just words. This book shows our history of standing together. Let us unite and build our future.
Oh my gosh, we did it!
Congratulations, the Smith cousins!
The village of Chandipur was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's stories. Every small victory, every mistake, every family secret seemed to travel through the narrow, dusty streets faster than the wind. But there was one story that people whispered about more than any other. It was the story of a girl who was so determined to outshine everyone around her that she forgot what it meant to truly care for the people closest to her. Her name was Mira. From the outside, Mira looked like the perfect cousin. She was clever, hardworking, and always smiling when elders were around. Teachers praised her. Neighbors admired her. Relatives often compared their own children to her and said things like, "Why can't you be more like Mira?" But inside the family, things felt very different. Mira had 3 cousins who grew up with her like siblings: Ravi, Naina, and little Arjun. Their homes stood side by side, their childhoods tied together with shared meals, festivals, school mornings, and endless games in the courtyard. To everyone else, they looked like the happiest group of cousins in the whole village. Yet slowly, something began to change. It started with small things. If Ravi scored the highest marks in school, Mira would quietly spend the entire night studying just to beat him in the next exam. When Naina won a drawing competition, Mira suddenly decided she loved painting too, and within weeks she was entering every contest she could find. At first, everyone thought it was harmless competition. In fact, many adults even praised it. Competition makes children stronger, they would say. But what nobody noticed was how far Mira was willing to go. She didn't just want to do well. She wanted to be the best. Always. And not just by a little. She wanted everyone else to feel small next to her. If Ravi prepared for a school debate, Mira would secretly learn the topic beforehand and volunteer at the last minute just so she could steal the spotlight. If Naina practiced singing for a festival performance, Mira would suddenly join the same event and perform right after her with something even grander. Slowly, the fun in their childhood games began to fade. Ravi started keeping his plans to himself. Naina stopped talking about the competition she entered. Even little Arjun, who once followed Mira everywhere, began to stay quiet whenever she was around. But Mira didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she didn't care. The truth was, every time someone praised her, something inside her felt satisfied. It was like a fire that kept growing. The louder the applause, the more she wanted it. And soon, that fire began pushing her to do things she had never done before. Things that made her cousins uncomfortable. Things that slowly turned family celebrations into silent competitions. During one festival, Ravi had been chosen to lead the school's cultural parade. It was something he had worked toward for months. The whole family was excited to see him proudly walk at the front of the procession. But on the morning of the parade, something unexpected happened. At the last minute, the organizers suddenly announced a new performer who would lead a special dance before the parade began. That performer was Mira. She walked onto the stage with confidence, wearing a beautiful costume that nobody in the family had even seen before. The crowd cheered loudly. Cameras flashed. Teachers applauded. And Ravi, who had been standing nearby preparing for his moment, felt his excitement quietly disappear. By the time the parade began, everyone in the crowd was still talking about Mira's performance. Hardly anyone noticed Ravi anymore. That day was the first time Naina saw tears in her brother's eyes. But even then, nobody said anything. Because in Chandipur, people admired success. And Mira looked exactly like success. Still, behind the smiles, the tension in the family kept growing. Ravi and Naina began to feel like they could never breathe without Mira turning it into another competition. Every achievement they worked for somehow became her stage. Every special moment somehow became her victory. Little by little, the cousins who once shared everything began drifting apart. But life has a strange way of testing people. Especially those who believe they must always stand above everyone else. One evening, a big announcement arrived at the village school. It was an opportunity unlike anything Chandipur had ever seen before. A regional talent showcase was coming, and the winner would receive a scholarship and recognition across many cities. Students from several schools would compete. Only one person from Chandipur school could represent them. Suddenly, excitement filled the classrooms. Everyone knew this opportunity could change someone's future. And almost immediately, people began whispering the same name. Mira will win it easily. But this time, something unexpected happened. Ravi quietly submitted his name for the selection. So did Naina. For the first time in years, all three cousins were standing in the same competition, aiming for the same dream. When Mira heard the news, her smile slowly faded. Because this wasn't just another school activity. This was something big, something important. And suddenly, the cousins she had spent years trying to outshine were standing directly in her path. The family dinner table that night felt unusually quiet. No teasing, no laughter. Just three determined faces, and a tension nobody dared to speak about. But what nobody in the family knew was that the coming weeks would test them in ways none of them expected. Because sometimes the real competition isn't about talent. It's about choices. And Mira was about to face a choice that could change everything between her and the cousins she once grew up with. A choice that would decide whether she would finally learn the value of family, or lose it completely. That night after dinner, the house was quieter than usual. The plates had been cleared, the elders were talking softly in the other room, and the cousins sat outside in the courtyard where they had spent most of their childhood playing games. But now none of them were playing. Ravi leaned back against the old mango tree, staring at the ground. Naina sat beside the steps, slowly turning a small stone between her fingers. Arjun, who was still too young to understand everything, kept glancing between them. And Mira stood near the doorway watching them all. For the first time in years, no one was talking to her. The announcement about the regional talent showcase had changed something between them. It was no longer just about small school competitions or festival performances. This was something bigger. Something serious. The school would choose only one student to represent Chandipur. Just one. And suddenly, the cousins who had grown up side by side were standing on opposite sides of the same path. Inside her mind, Mira could already hear the voices of the villagers. Of course Mira will win. She always wins. Those words had followed her for years. They had become part of her identity. Being the best wasn't just something she liked anymore. It was something everyone expected from her. But now Ravi and Naina had entered the competition too. And that made things different. The next morning at school, the excitement was impossible to ignore. Students crowded around the notice board, whispering and pointing at the announcement. The selection process would take place over 3 rounds. First, each student would present their talent in front of the teachers. Then the top 3 performers would move to the final stage, where the school would decide who would represent Chandipur in the regional event. Almost every student knew who the top candidates were likely to be. Mira, Ravi, and Naina. The teachers knew it too. Over the next few days, the atmosphere inside the school slowly changed. Normally, the cousins walked together in the hallways, shared lunch under the same tree, and joked during breaks. But now they kept their distance. Ravi spent most of his time in the music room, practicing his instrument again and again. The soft sound of the strings echoed through the empty classroom late into the afternoon. Naina stayed in the art room after school, filling page after page in her sketchbook. Sometimes she erased entire drawings and started over without saying a word. And Mira began preparing in her own way. She stayed up late at night practicing her dance routines. The small lamp in her room often stayed on long after everyone else had gone to sleep. Footsteps tapped softly against the floor as she repeated the same movements again and again. Perfect. Everything had to be perfect. Yet something about this competition felt different to her. Usually when she prepared for something, she felt excited, confident, almost certain that she would win. But now there was a strange feeling in her chest. Not fear exactly. Something closer to pressure. Because for the first time, she knew her biggest challenge wasn't someone from another school. It was someone from her own family. One afternoon, as Mira walked past the music room, she heard Ravi practicing inside. The melody he was playing was calm and powerful at the same time. It filled the hallway with a quiet kind of emotion. She paused by the door for a moment. Ravi had always been talented. Everyone knew that. But he rarely tried to compete with others. Music had always been something he played simply because he loved it. But now, the way he practiced looked different. Focused, determined. Mira felt a small knot tighten in her stomach. Without thinking, she moved away from the door and continued down the hallway. Later that day, she passed the art room. Through the window she saw Naina working on a large canvas. Colors covered the table, and sunlight from the window lit up the painting. Even from a distance, Mira could see that the artwork was beautiful. Nina leaned closer, adding careful details with a steady hand. She looked completely lost in her work, as if the whole world had disappeared around her. For a brief moment, Mira remembered something. Years ago, when they were younger, Nina used to show her every drawing she made. "Look, Mira, do you like it?" Back then, Mira would smile and nod quickly before rushing off to her own activities. Now, standing outside the room, she realized she hadn't looked at one of Nina's paintings in a very long time. The bell rang suddenly, breaking her thoughts. Students rushed into the hallway as classes ended for the day. And the first round of the school selection was only 3 days away. The teachers had already started preparing the stage in the assembly hall. Chairs were being arranged, lights were being tested, and the school principal reminded everyone that this competition would decide who represented Chandipur in the regional talent showcase. The entire village seemed to be talking about it now. Parents discussed it at the marketplace. Neighbors mentioned it during evening walks. Some supported Ravi's music. Others admired Nina's creativity. But many still believed that Mira's confidence and stage presence would easily win the judges over. The pressure around the cousins continued to grow. At home, dinners remained quiet. Arjun tried to tell jokes sometimes, hoping to bring back the laughter they once shared, but the tension in the air never fully disappeared. Everyone was preparing. Everyone was watching. And deep inside, each cousin knew that once the competition began, things between them might never feel the same again. But what none of them realized yet was that something unexpected was slowly unfolding behind the scenes. Something that would soon make this competition far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The day of the first selection round finally arrived, and the entire school felt different that morning. Students gathered earlier than usual, whispering about the performances they were about to see. The assembly hall had been decorated with simple banners, and rows of chairs filled the room. Teachers moved around with clipboards, making sure everything was ready. Backstage, the participants waited quietly. Ravi sat on a wooden chair, carefully tuning his instrument. His fingers moved slowly across the strings, adjusting each sound with patience. He wasn't looking around much. His focus stayed on the instrument resting in his lap, but every now and then his eyes drifted toward the curtain that separated the stage from the waiting area. On the other side of the room, Nina stood near a table where her large canvas was placed on a stand. She had decided to create her artwork live during the performance. Several small jars of paint were lined up neatly beside her brushes. She checked them again and again, even though she had already arranged everything perfectly. And Mira stood near the mirror. She adjusted the edge of her costume and tied her hair once more. Her dance routine had been practiced so many times that every movement was already inside her mind. Still, she kept going through the steps quietly, counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3. The tension backstage felt heavy. None of the cousins spoke to each other. Other students were performing too, but most people knew the attention would eventually turn toward the 3 cousins from the same family. As the performances began, the audience slowly settled down. A few singers went first. Then a group of students performed a short play. The judges watched carefully, writing notes after each act. Backstage, Ravi finally stood up when he heard his name announced. He walked toward the stage without looking back. When he stepped under the bright lights, the hall became quiet. For a moment he simply stood there, holding the instrument. Then his fingers touched the strings and the music began. The melody was soft at first, almost like a quiet conversation. But slowly it grew stronger. The sound filled the room in a way that made people stop shifting in their chairs. Even the teachers looked surprised. The music carried emotion that didn't need words. Some students leaned forward without realizing it. Others simply closed their eyes and listened. Backstage, Mira stood still as she heard the music drifting through the curtain. She hadn't expected this. Ravi had always been good, but today his performance sounded deeper, more powerful. Every note seemed to carry something personal. Something honest. For a brief second she felt that familiar pressure again. When Ravi finished, the hall erupted in applause. He gave a small nod and walked off stage quietly. As he passed Mira, their eyes met for a moment, but neither of them said anything. Soon after, Nina's name was called. She rolled her canvas onto the stage and placed it under the lights. At first, the audience seemed curious but unsure what to expect. Painting during a performance wasn't something the school usually saw. Nina picked up her brush. And then she began. The first strokes were simple shapes, spreading color across the blank canvas. Slowly the picture started forming. A landscape appeared, with soft hills and a narrow path running through them. But the more she painted, the clearer the scene became. It was Chandipur. The village homes, the mango trees, the small school building at the center. Every detail appeared one brushstroke at a time. Students in the audience began whispering as they recognized familiar places. Near the end, she added small figures walking together on the path. 4 children. The audience grew silent. Backstage, Mira watched the painting from the side of the curtain. Something about the image made her chest tighten slightly, because the 4 figures looked strangely familiar. Then Nina placed the final stroke on the canvas and stepped back. The audience clapped loudly, some even standing to get a better look at the artwork. When she returned backstage, she avoided looking directly at Mira. Now only one major performance remained. The teachers called Mira's name. The applause started even before she stepped onto the stage. Many students already expected her to shine. She walked forward confidently, the stage lights reflecting off her costume. The music began and she started her routine. Her movements were sharp, controlled, and full of energy. Every spin, every step landed exactly where it should. She had practiced this routine so many times that her body followed the rhythm perfectly. The audience clapped along with the music. From the outside, everything looked flawless. But inside her mind, something felt different. For the first time during a performance, her thoughts weren't completely focused on the dance. Images kept flashing in her mind. Ravi's music. Nina's painting. The 4 small figures on the path. For just a split second, one step of her routine came half a beat late. Most people in the audience didn't notice. But Mira noticed. And that tiny mistake stayed in her mind for the rest of the performance. When the music ended, the applause was loud again. The judges thanked her and asked all the performers to wait while they discussed the results. Backstage, the cousins sat in different corners of the room. Minutes passed. The teachers gathered near the stage, speaking quietly among themselves. Occasionally one of them glanced toward the waiting students. Finally, the principal stepped forward with a small paper in his hand. The hall grew silent again. He cleared his throat and prepared to announce the 3 students who would move to the final round. But just before he could speak, another teacher hurried toward him and whispered something urgently in his ear. The principal's expression suddenly changed. He looked down at the paper again, then out at the audience. And for a moment, the entire room felt like it was holding its breath. The assembly hall remained silent as the principal stood still with the paper in his hand. The teacher beside him whispered a few more words, pointing briefly toward the backstage area. For a moment, confusion spread across the judges' table. Students in the audience began looking at one another. Something wasn't right. The principal finally leaned toward the microphone, but instead of announcing the names immediately, he spoke in a slower, more careful tone. "There has been a small matter brought to our attention," he said. "Please remain seated while we take a moment to review something." A quiet wave of murmurs moved through the hall. Backstage, the contestants looked at each other with puzzled expressions. Ravi frowned slightly, adjusting the strap of his instrument. Nina wiped her hands on a cloth, trying to remove the remaining paint from her fingers. Mira felt a strange chill run through her. She had no idea what the teacher had whispered, but the way everyone suddenly looked serious made her stomach tighten. A few minutes passed. The teachers gathered together near the side of the stage, talking quietly. One of them walked backstage and spoke briefly with another staff member. Their voices were low, but the tension in their faces was clear. Students started guessing what might be happening. Maybe someone broke a rule, someone whispered from the audience. Or maybe they made a mistake in the scoring, another student said. Backstage, the silence between the cousins felt heavier than before. Ravi glanced toward the curtain that separated them from the stage. "Do either of you know what this is about?" he asked quietly. Nina shook her head. "No." Their eyes slowly shifted toward Mira. She looked away quickly, pretending to adjust the bracelet on her wrist. The truth was, she didn't know what was happening either. But the strange feeling in her chest kept growing. It was the same uneasy pressure she had felt earlier during her performance. After a few more minutes, the principal finally returned to the microphone. His voice was calm but serious. "We apologize for the delay," he said. "Before we announce the final 3 performers, we need to clarify something related to the preparation of today's acts." The hall grew quiet again. Backstage, several students leaned closer to the curtain to hear better. The principal continued. "One of our teachers noticed something unusual regarding a rehearsal schedule and access to the practice rooms this week. We are simply verifying the details before making our final decision." Whispers spread across the audience again. Some students exchanged curious looks. Practice rooms? Schedules? Backstage, Ravi's eyebrows pulled together slightly. He thought back to the past few days. The music room had been locked twice when he arrived for practice, even though it was usually open. At the time he assumed the janitor had forgotten to unlock it. But now he wasn't so sure. Nina also looked thoughtful. 2 days earlier, she had left her sketchbook in the art room overnight. The next morning when she returned, it had been moved to a different table. A few pages had been slightly bent. She hadn't mentioned it to anyone. At the time it didn't seem important. But hearing the principal's words now made her mind replay that moment. Backstage, Mira stood perfectly still. A quiet memory flashed through her mind. Late one evening earlier that week, she had walked past the music room and noticed Ravi's notebook lying on the table. It contained his practice notes and part of the melody he planned to perform. She had picked it up. Only for a moment. At the time, curiosity had gotten the better of her. She wanted to know what he was preparing. That was all. She hadn't touched anything else. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. The principal cleared his throat again, bringing everyone's attention back. "We want to be fair to every participant," he said. "This competition is not only about talent but also about honesty and respect." The words hung in the air. Backstage, the cousins avoided looking directly at each other. Arjun, who had been sitting in the audience with the rest of the younger students, watched the stage nervously. He didn't understand all the details, but he could sense something serious was happening. The principal turned slightly, speaking quietly with the judges one more time. Then he looked back at the microphone. "While we review this matter, we will still proceed with announcing the 3 finalists," he said. The audience leaned forward again. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Backstage, the contestants stood slowly. Ravi placed his instrument case on the floor and straightened his shoulders. Nina folded her arms nervously, her fingers still stained with small traces of paint. Mira tried to steady her breathing. The principal looked down at the paper once more. "In no particular order," he began, "the students moving to the final round of the Chandipur School Talent Selection are..." He paused. The entire hall seemed frozen. "Ravi!" Applause erupted from the audience. Ravi blinked in surprise but stepped forward slightly. The principal continued. "Nina." More applause followed. Some students even stood up to clap for her artwork. Backstage, Mira's heartbeat grew louder in her ears. Only one name remained. The principal looked down again, then lifted his eyes toward the crowd. "And the 3rd finalist is..." He stopped mid-sentence. Because at that exact moment, the teacher who had spoken to him earlier rushed back onto the stage holding a small notebook. The same notebook Ravi had been using all week. The teacher whispered something urgently. The principal's expression shifted again, this time more serious than before. The applause slowly faded as the room filled with confused murmurs. Backstage, Ravi stared at the notebook in the teacher's hand. Nina looked between the stage and Mira, her face filled with uncertainty. And Mira felt the ground beneath her confidence begin to shake. Because whatever the teacher had just discovered, it was about to change everything. The hall had gone so quiet that even the creak of the wooden stage could be heard. The teacher stood beside the principal holding Ravi's notebook, and the serious look on both their faces made the audience uneasy. Students whispered to each other again, trying to understand what was happening. Backstage, Ravi stared at the notebook with confusion. "That's mine," he said softly. Nina's eyes moved from the stage to Mira and back again. She could feel the tension building in the room like a storm waiting to break. The principal leaned toward the microphone again, choosing his words carefully. "It appears that this notebook was found in one of the rehearsal rooms just moments ago," he said. "We believe it belongs to one of the contestants." Ravi slowly stepped closer to the curtain. "Yes, sir," he said. "It's mine." The teacher nodded and handed the notebook to the principal, who flipped through a few pages. Inside were Ravi's handwritten notes, small sketches of musical patterns, and the melody he had practiced all week. But there was something else too. A few pages had been folded in an unusual way, as if someone had opened them recently. The principal looked toward the contestants backstage. "Ravi," he said gently, "when was the last time you had this notebook?" Ravi thought for a moment. "Yesterday afternoon," he answered. "I left it in the music room when I finished practicing." The teacher beside the principal spoke up. "That's what caught our attention," she said. "The music room was locked after school yesterday. Yet this notebook was found on the floor inside the hall's backstage area today." A ripple of whispers spread across the room. Someone had clearly moved it. Backstage, Mira felt her hands grow colder. She remembered the evening she had glanced at the notebook in the music room. But she had placed it back exactly where she found it. Hadn't she? Or had she accidentally left it somewhere else while looking through it? Her thoughts began racing. The principal continued speaking. "We are not making any accusations," he said firmly. "But since this competition values fairness, we must understand how this happened." Ravi shook his head slowly. "I didn't move it," he said. "I haven't even been backstage today." The teacher nodded. "We believe you," she replied. "But there is something else." The audience leaned forward again. She held up the notebook slightly. "Inside this notebook," she said, "we found something unusual written on the last page." The principal turned the notebook so the judges could see. A few words had been written in pencil near the bottom of the page. The handwriting looked rushed, almost like someone had scribbled it quickly. Ravi frowned. "That wasn't there before," he said quietly. The teacher read the words out loud. "Change the ending. Judges like stronger finishes." The hall filled with confused murmurs. The message sounded like advice. Advice meant for a performance. The principal looked toward Ravi again. "Did you write this?" Ravi shook his head immediately. "No, sir." Backstage, Nina felt a strange chill. Someone had not only moved Ravi's notebook, but had written inside it. Which meant someone had been looking at his performance notes. Her mind started connecting pieces she hadn't thought about earlier. The locked music room. The moved sketchbook. The sudden tension between the cousins. Meanwhile, Mira stood completely still. A memory surfaced again, clearer this time. The night she had opened Ravi's notebook, she had noticed something about his final melody. It ended softly, fading into silence. At that moment, she had thought it might be stronger if it finished with a higher note. The idea had stayed in her mind. But she didn't remember writing anything down. Did she? The principal closed the notebook slowly. "This note may seem small," he said, "but it suggests that someone accessed Ravi's preparation without permission." The word permission echoed through the hall. Now the whispers were louder. Students began glancing toward the backstage area where the contestants stood. Backstage, the air felt heavy. Ravi crossed his arms, clearly frustrated now. "Why would someone do that?" he muttered. Nina didn't answer. Instead, she studied the notebook again from a distance. Something about the writing bothered her. Not the message itself. The handwriting. It looked familiar. Not exactly the same as anyone she could clearly remember, but there was something about the way certain letters curved that made her uneasy. Her eyes slowly shifted toward Mira. Mira avoided looking back. The principal spoke again, trying to calm the growing tension. "We will review this matter carefully," he said. "For now, we will continue with the competition process." But before he could finish his sentence, another teacher stood up from the judges' table. "There is one more detail," she said. The room grew silent again. She held up a small object between her fingers. A thin silver bracelet. Mira's breath caught in her throat, because she recognized it instantly. It was hers. The teacher continued. "This bracelet was found near the backstage door this morning," she explained. "At first we assumed someone had simply dropped it. But considering the situation with the notebook..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Every eye in the hall slowly turned toward the backstage entrance. And Mira suddenly realized something terrifying. Her bracelet had slipped off earlier while she was adjusting her costume. She hadn't even noticed it was gone. Now it was sitting in the teacher's hand, right beside Ravi's notebook. Ravi turned his head slowly toward Mira. Nina did the same. Neither of them spoke. But the question in their eyes was impossible to miss. And standing there under the weight of hundreds of curious stares, Mira felt the carefully built image she had carried for years begin to crack. Because the competition was no longer just about talent. Now it was about trust. And the truth behind that notebook was still waiting to come out. The silence in the hall felt heavier than anything before. The teacher still held the silver bracelet, and the principal slowly looked from the object to the contestants backstage. Everyone in the room could sense that something important was about to unfold. Mira felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears. For the first time in years, she didn't feel confident standing in front of people. The bracelet in the teacher's hand seemed to glow under the lights, almost like it was calling attention to her. The principal spoke carefully. "Whose bracelet is this?" For a moment, nobody moved. Ravi looked at it, then slowly turned toward Mira again. Nina followed his gaze. Even the students sitting in the audience began whispering the same thought. Mira finally stepped forward from behind the curtain. "It's mine," she said quietly. The whispers grew louder across the hall. The principal nodded calmly. "Thank you for being honest. Can you tell us how it ended up near the backstage door?" Mira swallowed. Her mind rushed through the past few days. She remembered practicing late in the hall the evening before the competition. She had walked past several rooms while repeating her dance steps. I must have dropped it yesterday while practicing, she said. I didn't realize it was missing. The teachers exchanged quick glances. The principal then lifted Ravi's notebook again. And this notebook was also found nearby, he added. Do you know anything about that? Mira froze. This was the moment she had been hoping would never come. For years she had always found a way to stay ahead. She had always made sure she looked like the best student, the most talented cousin, the one everyone admired. But now the room was waiting for the truth. She looked toward Ravi. He wasn't angry. He just looked confused and hurt. That look made something inside her chest twist. She started, but her voice faded. The entire hall was silent again. Then she took a slow breath. I did look at Ravi's notebook, she said finally. Gasps spread through the audience. Ravi's eyes widened. Mira kept speaking, her voice still quiet but steady now. I saw it in the music room one evening. I was curious about his performance, so I opened it. I read some of his notes. But I didn't take it away and I didn't try to ruin anything. The teachers listened closely. The principal asked gently, Did you write the message inside? Mira shook her head quickly. No, I didn't write that. Ravi looked back at the notebook again, thinking. That note really wasn't there before, he said slowly. Nina stepped forward as well. I believe her, she said. The room turned toward her. Nina pointed toward the notebook. The handwriting on that message, it doesn't match Mira's. And it doesn't match Ravi's either. The teachers looked more carefully at the page again. She continued, and something else felt strange this week. My sketchbook had been moved too. I thought maybe it was just a mistake, but now it feels connected. The principal nodded thoughtfully. So you believe someone else accessed the preparation rooms? Nina gave a small nod. Before anyone could say more, another voice came from the audience. Sir, I think I know something. Everyone turned. It was Arjun. The youngest cousin stood nervously near the back row. A teacher walked over and helped him step closer to the stage. The principal spoke kindly. Go ahead, Arjun. Arjun looked a little frightened with so many people watching him, but he kept talking. Yesterday after school I saw someone near the music room, he said. I thought they were just cleaning. Do you remember who it was? The principal asked. Arjun nodded slowly. It was Vikram from the senior class. A wave of surprise spread across the hall. Vikram was well known in the school. He had tried to enter the talent selection earlier but hadn't passed the initial registration because he submitted his form late. All eyes searched the audience. Vikram was sitting a few rows back, looking suddenly uncomfortable. A teacher walked toward him. Is that true? She asked. Vikram hesitated, then stood up slowly. I didn't mean for it to become such a big problem, he admitted. The principal motioned for him to come forward. When he reached the stage, the hall became quiet again. I saw Ravi practicing earlier this week, Vikram explained. His music was really good. I thought if he changed the ending slightly, it would sound even stronger. So when I found the notebook lying there yesterday, I wrote that suggestion. You moved the notebook backstage? The teacher asked. Vikram nodded. Yes. I was going to give it back to him today but dropped it when someone came into the hallway. Ravi let out a long breath. So the message was just advice? He asked. Yes, Vikram replied. I wasn't trying to sabotage anyone. The tension in the room slowly began to ease. The teachers discussed it quietly for a moment before the principal returned to the microphone. It seems this was a misunderstanding rather than an attempt to cheat, he said. However, contestants must respect each other's preparation. Let this be a lesson for everyone. The audience nodded, relieved. But the real surprise came next. The principal looked back at the paper in his hand. Now, he said, we will complete the announcement. He cleared his throat. The third finalist joining Ravi and Nina is. Mira felt her breath stop. Mira. The hall erupted into applause again. For a moment, Mira didn't move. She looked at Ravi and Nina, unsure what they were thinking. Then Ravi gave a small smile. Looks like we're all still in this, he said. Nina nodded. Fair and square. For the first time in days, the tension between them softened. But just as the excitement began to settle, the principal raised his hand again. There is one more announcement, he said. The room quieted. After reviewing today's performances, he continued, the judges have decided something unusual. Students leaned forward. This year, instead of sending only one student to the regional talent showcase, Chandipur School will send a team performance. The audience gasped. A collaboration between music, art, and dance. The principal smiled slightly. And the three cousins standing here will represent the school together. The hall burst into louder applause than before. Ravi laughed in surprise. Nina looked stunned. And Mira stood there, realizing something she had never understood before. For years she had been trying to outshine everyone. But the moment that truly mattered wasn't about standing above her cousins. It was about standing beside them. And somehow that felt even brighter. For a few seconds after the principal's announcement, Mira couldn't move. The applause around her felt distant, almost like it belonged to someone else's moment. She had spent years chasing the idea of standing alone as the best, yet now the biggest opportunity of her life had come in a completely different way. Beside her, Ravi let out a surprised laugh and shook his head. A team performance, he said. I didn't see that coming. Nina looked from the principal to the audience and then at her cousins. Neither did I. The judges explained that the regional talent showcase was encouraging creative collaboration this year. When they saw Ravi's emotional music, Nina's beautiful painting of the village, and Mira's powerful dance, they realized something special could happen if the three talents were combined. The story of Chandipur, one judge said with a smile. Told through music, art, and dance together. The students in the hall clapped again, excited by the idea. But Mira felt something deeper than excitement. She slowly looked at Ravi and Nina. For so long she had treated their achievements like obstacles she needed to defeat. Now their talents were being placed beside hers, not against them. For the first time, the competition didn't feel like a battle. It felt like a responsibility. After the event ended, the cousins walked home together in the evening light. The dusty road that passed through the village felt strangely quiet compared to the loud excitement of the school hall. Arjun walked ahead of them, happily kicking a small stone along the path. Ravi finally broke the silence. You know, he said, when this competition started, I thought things would only get worse between us. Nina nodded slowly. I thought so too. Mira didn't say anything at first. She had been thinking about the moment on stage when everyone looked at her after the bracelet was discovered. The fear she felt then had been real. Not because she thought she would lose the competition, but because she realized how easily trust could break. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Both Ravi and Nina looked at her. For looking at your notebook, she added. I shouldn't have done that. I was just worried about losing. Ravi thought for a moment, then gave a small shrug. We were all under pressure. But that doesn't mean it was right, Mira replied. Nina studied her face carefully. For the first time in a long while, Mira didn't sound like she was trying to prove something. You know what bothered me the most these past few years? Nina said softly. Mira looked at her. It wasn't that you were talented, Nina continued. It was that you always felt like you had to beat us. Like we couldn't shine at the same time. The words stayed in the air between them. Mira lowered her eyes for a moment. She had never heard it explained so clearly before. I think I forgot something important, she admitted. I thought success meant being ahead of everyone else. Ravi smiled a little. Maybe now we get to try something different. By the time they reached home, the rest of the family was already waiting in the courtyard. News from the school had traveled quickly through Chandipur, and the elders were eager to hear every detail. Arjun excitedly told the story before anyone else could speak. They're all going together, he shouted. Music, painting, and dance. The adults looked surprised but proud. That sounds like a beautiful idea, one of the uncles said. The following weeks became some of the busiest days the cousins had ever experienced. Preparing a team performance was very different from preparing alone. They had to plan how Ravi's music would guide the rhythm of the dance, how Nina's artwork would appear on stage, and how the entire story would flow from beginning to end. At first it wasn't easy. Sometimes Ravi wanted the music to slow down while Mira's dance needed a faster rhythm. Sometimes Nina needed more time to complete a painting while the performance moved forward. There were moments of disagreement, moments when old habits almost returned. But something had changed. Instead of trying to outshine one another, they began listening. Late evenings were spent practicing in the school hall. Ravi would sit with his instrument, adjusting the melody while Mira practiced her steps nearby. Nina worked on a large canvas that slowly came to life with colors showing the story of their village. Arjun often sat in the corner watching them, clapping whenever a part of the performance came together. One night, after hours of practice, they finally stepped back and looked at the full rehearsal. Ravi's music filled the hall with emotion. Mira's dance carried the movement of the story. And Nina's painting slowly revealed the journey of 4 children growing up in the same village. The same 4 figures from the path she had painted earlier. Mira noticed it again and smiled. Those kids look familiar, she said. Nina grinned. They should. When the day of the regional talent showcase finally arrived, the cousins stood backstage together just like before. But this time the feeling was completely different. No silence. No distance. Just quiet focus. Ravi adjusted the strings of his instrument. Nina prepared her brushes. Mira stretched her arms gently, ready for the performance. Before stepping onto the stage, Ravi looked at both of them and said something simple. No matter what happens today, this already feels like a win. Mira nodded. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about being the best. She was thinking about the journey that brought them here, the mistakes, the lessons, and the moment when competition turned into cooperation. As the stage lights came on and the music began, the story of Chandipur started to unfold in front of a new audience. And somewhere inside that performance was a quiet reminder. Sometimes the brightest success doesn't come from outshining the people around you. Sometimes it comes from learning how to shine together.